Ladies and gentlemen, tighten your helmet straps, shine your boots, and prepare for the tale of a motorcycle that carried one of the most confusing names in Italian history. No, not a red car with 12 cylinders roaring down Monza. This was a little two-stroke that made Enzo Ferrari so angry he nearly choked on his espresso. I'm talking about the Fratelli Ferrari 150. A Milanese oddball that looked like a modest commuter bike but carried a surname heavy enough to start courtroom drama. And before we roll any further, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because without your click, I'll be stuck telling these stories to the pigeons in the park. And trust me, they're terrible critics. Now, let's rewind to the early 1950s. Post-war Italy was buzzing with scooters, motorcycles, and dreams of cheap mobility. Gasoline was scarce, cars were luxuries, and just about every blacksmith who could weld two tubes together was suddenly a motorcycle manufacturer. Into this chaotic scene walked Amos Ferrari, no relation to Enzo, though he must have enjoyed the brief confusion. Amos had cut his teeth at Moto Peria, and in 1952 he decided he could do better on his own. So he and his brother set up shop in Milan under the name Meccanica Italiana Fratelli Ferrari. Imagine the looks on the faces at the 1952 Milan Motorcycle Show when people spotted the word Ferrari in bright red on the tank. Crowds swarmed thinking Enzo had built a motorbike, and some poor salesman probably had to explain 50 times an hour, "No, sir, this Ferrari doesn't go 150 miles per hour. It goes about 60 on a good day, downhill, with a tailwind." The first model was the Ferrari 125, a single-cylinder two-stroke with some Peria DNA but a curious suspension trick, horizontally mounted torsion bars at the rear. Then came the upgrade, the Ferrari 150 Lusso Sport, and later a Super Sport variant. They debuted late in 1952 with a slightly larger engine, a tubular steel cradle frame, telescopic front forks, and, depending on which version rolled out, a 3-speed gearbox with a shifter on the left side. By 1954, the strange Gilera-style horizontal twin tubes out back gave way to more conventional vertical coil springs. Financially, though, the Ferraris weren't winning the race. The Italian market was absolutely packed with competitors: Ducati, MV Agusta, Moto Guzzi, Lambretta, and dozens of smaller firms. It was like a crowded street market where everyone was selling the same tomatoes, except some of the tomatoes came with famous racing pedigrees. To make matters worse, Enzo Ferrari was not amused. In 1953, he sued the Milanese brothers for trademark infringement. The court decided that if they insisted on keeping the Ferrari name, they had to prefix it with Fratelli, meaning Brothers Ferrari. That's how the bikes became known officially as Fratelli Ferrari from 1953 onward, and the famous prancing horse was strictly off limits. By 1955, the party was over. The market was cutthroat. The lawsuit had hurt sales, and the firm quietly closed its doors on November 15th. Total production across all models only reached a few hundred units. A handful of 165 cubic centimeter and even 175 cubic centimeter twins appeared, plus a short-lived 250 cubic centimeter GT, but the 150 remained the company's bread and butter. Now let's get greasy with the technical bits, because I know you're here not just for courtroom gossip, but also to see what made this tiny machine tick. The Fratelli Ferrari 150 packed a 150 cubic centimeter single-cylinder two-stroke engine. It was piston-ported and usually ran on a Del Orto carburetor, around 25 millimeters, in the sportier setups. Power numbers weren't officially recorded, but we're talking roughly 6 to 8 horsepower, enough to outpace a donkey cart, but not exactly to frighten a Maserati. Ignition was via magneto or coil, and the gearbox was a 3-speed manual operated by a left-foot shifter, unusual for Italy at the time. The engine was mounted in a tubular steel cradle frame, which gave it decent rigidity. Up front you had telescopic forks, while the rear, depending on year, either used that odd horizontal twin-tube Gilera-style suspension, or after 1954, more conventional vertical coilover shocks. Brakes were drums, both front and rear, and the wheels were spoked with narrow 18 or 19 inches tires. Length was around 6 feet 9 inches, about 2.7 meters, width about 1 foot 7 inches, 0.50 meters, and curb weight hovered near 190 pounds, about 86 kilograms. Top speed was in the neighborhood of 60 to 65 miles per hour, roughly 100 to 105 kilometers per hour, which made it a decent commuter, but not a racer. Fuel consumption would have landed in the ballpark of 50 to 60 miles per gallon, not bad for the era, especially when Italian wallets were still recovering from the war. In essence, the Fratelli Ferrari 150 was a working man's roadster disguised with an aristocratic name. It didn't revolutionize engineering, but it did give us a good story about how names, pride, and a pinch of legal trouble can sink a small company faster than a leaking oil pan. Unlike the flashier MV Agustas or the racy Ducati 98s of the same era, the Fratelli Ferrari 150 went for a roadster look. Plain fenders, narrow handlebars, a simple saddle, and not a drop of chrome wasted. Even the exhaust pipe was modest and low-slung, like it was afraid to attract attention. The market, however, was brutal. With post-war economies rising and transport demand booming, motorcycle companies popped up faster than bad advice on the internet. Most of them vanished just as quickly. I once knew a guy who claimed his cousin started a moped company in Naples in 1954 and shut it down the same week because nobody in town had legs shorter than the seat height, so... How much for a piece of this motorcycling footnote? Back in the day, a Fratelli Ferrari 150 would have cost a few $100,000 Italian lire, let's say $300,000 to $400,000. That's roughly $2,000 in 1954 money, which translates to around $20,000 to $30,000 today, or about 18,500 to 28,000 euros. Fast forward to today and things get spicy. In 2017, a 1954 Fratelli Ferrari 150 sold in the United Kingdom for £8,400 sterling. That's around $11,300 at the time. But then that same bike hit the Los Angeles auction block in 2022 and roared up to $34,500. Even more shocking, a related 165 cubic centimeter Fratelli Ferrari model fetched $53,900 at Milan Monterey in 2018. Makes you wonder why you spent your money on NFTs and air fryers. At the end of the day, what I liked the most about the Fratelli Ferrari 150 is its sheer audacity. Two guys in a tiny Milan shop had the guts to name their bike Ferrari, build it with care, and roll it out into a world of giants. It wasn't perfect, but it was charming, rare, and filled with that wonderfully naive post-war optimism. If motorcycles were soup, this one would be minestrone. Simple, warm, full of bits, and a little Italian mystery thrown in for good measure. And remember, folks, the next time someone offers to swap their rare vintage bike for your fridge, just smile, nod, and back away slowly. Because unless that bike can chill beer and make ice cubes, it's not a fair trade. Ride safe, steer clear of legal battles, and subscribe to Timmy Tiny Wheels, where the bikes are small, the stories are loud, and the jokes are mostly street legal.